I'm Muzz, one of the drum instructors here at the Real School of Music. Welcome to Beat of the Week. Hi. To start the series, what I would like to do is basically explain what makes up a drum set, and then what makes up a kind of large drum set, which is what I use. Most drum sets have a few similar components. The first being the bass drum, or what's called the kick drum. We call it the kick drum because if you're being mic'd in a setting with other band members, you don't want to confuse it with bass guitar. So we oftentimes call it the kick drum. The second is the snare drum, which supplies the backbeat. This particular setup, I have a double pedal, and it allows me to independently control with my right and left foot beaters. So if I wanted to, I could play a roll. You heard the snare. The next most common thing to a drum set is the hi-hat. I, of course, have kind of an odd hi-hat setup. I use what's called a cable hi-hat, which allows me to position it wherever I want. If you've ever sat down behind a drum set, or if you have a drum set at home, you have this crossover. When I use a cable hi-hat, I don't have that crossover. So if I'm coming down with the hi-hat stroke and I'm coming up with the left hand, there's no conflicting movement. So I'm always very free like that. The next most common item would be the ride cymbal. I would say if you had a bass drum, snare, hi-hat, and ride, you could probably do most gigs, which probably sounds funny coming from me because I have all these other items. When you put those elements together, you've got this. I use actually a couple of different hi-hats because sometimes I want what I'm using the hi-hat pedal to play to be more predominant in a groove. For instance, I'm going to play the same groove and I'm going to play it using my regular hi-hat, and then I'm going to put my foot on another pedal which has heavier cymbals. So if I'm playing a groove like this, but I want the rhythm that my hat foot is playing to be more of a part of the groove, I'll do it on the other hi-hat, and it'll sound like this. I also have, which is not really uncommon, an auxiliary or an X-hat, which allows me to play this kind of washy hat. And still do something with my hat foot. Most drum sets have at least one or two rack toms or mounted toms. They're called that because they're mounted. The third drum I hit is a floor tom. It's mounted on the floor. So if you look at just the bass drum, snare, hi-hat, rack tom, floor tom, and ride, this would be like a basic, what they call a 5-piece set. And it would be like this. I use an additional high tom, 10-inch rack tom. So if I was playing something like this, I think it makes that groove kind of stand out a little bit more. I also use a mounted bass drum. So if I'm doing a pattern that I don't think the floor tom gives me quite enough, I'm going to add that drum. I'll play the same beat and I'll use some different drums. For instance, so that's how I use this particular group of drums. Most kits also have a couple of crash cymbals. These are thinner cymbals, so they crash and disperse quickly. Ride cymbal is heavier, so it has more definition. And I also use a couple of different chimes. The one on my right is less abrasive than my left because on my left I do a lot of things like, and I want it to stand out more. If I'm using a china on my right, I want it to blend a little bit more. That's basically most of what's here, except I've got a couple of additions. I've got a cowbell, and I also have a cowbell with my left foot. Now, they don't have to be wild patterns. Sometimes you're playing a simple beat, and you may want to, kick it up a notch. For instance, here's a regular groove I recently had to play. And when we went to the B section of a song, I wanted to step it up a notch. So I went from this You can also get a little fancy when you mix things. For instance, let's say the cowbell with my stick, cowbell with my left foot, and you have something like that. There you go. That's the particular setup that I'm using. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time.